So, Ann, 6 years as a superintendent. That's a lifetime in today's world. Tell us a little bit about the district, and then tell us a little bit about how difficult the last couple of years for you, your colleagues, both other superintendents and the staff in your district has been.
Well, thanks first for just inviting me to talk with you and share a few moments and talk a little bit about the craziness of the last couple of years. I'm very fortunate to be in Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools, which you know is in beautiful Savannah, Georgia, city-county system, and we serve about 37,000 students. In the course of a year, though, based on the transiency rate in our system, we can serve up to about 41,000 in the course of just 1 year alone. I have
So you have like up to 4,000 kids in and out during the year?
In and out during the year.
That's a whole school system.
That's a whole school system,
Wow.
correct. And just based on the nature of Savannah, where it is located in coastal Georgia, beautiful location, right off of 95. And because of the tourism industry, we attract a lot of people, military as well. So we have lots of people moving in and out of our community, and that adds to the complexity, but also the richness of our area. We have about 5,600 employees, and we are very, very fortunate to run across 426 square miles from the beach to the county line, and we're the 10th largest school district in the state. All the other 9 larger districts are in the metro area.
Given the size of the district, have bus driver problems?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm looking for a magic pill to fix that. Yes, transportation, truncated in many, many ways.
I got a solution for you, Ann.
Okay.
It's what I did my first 2 years of teaching. Have your teachers be bus drivers.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
I don't think they'll be too excited about that. Okay, but
Well, we actually were very fortunate to have several of our staff members, primarily secondary folks who are coaches, who have CDLs, who volunteered this year. Now, of course, we paid them because that's a great skill to have, and we had a great need. They did serve early morning runs and afternoon runs, and I was so fortunate to have that. Didn't have enough, but when they could serve us, we were really happy to have them.
now, do you have any areas that you have teacher shortages in?
As always, special education is a critical need, math and science as well, but surprisingly, we're seeing a shortage also in elementary education.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? Early elementary or right across the board?
Well, it's kind of right across the board. We have a good number of students, teacher candidates who are in our system in the elementary education area, but just not enough.
Yeah. Wow. What percentage of your kids are free reduced lunch?
About 68%.
Heavy poverty.
Yes.
And kids in and out, but
Transiency, mobility is a factor that we do not talk about a lot, but it certainly does impact student achievement outcomes. So we've taken a stand in the district around making sure that we are pretty consistent in our curriculum and implementation across the district, so that it doesn't matter where Bill is in school one part of the year or another part of the year. It also helps us when we have a great menu of interventions so that we can meet students wherever they are and try to catch them up.
you know, you were our commissioner on the Learning 2025 commission, and we talked about 3 kind of cultural beliefs. And the first one is we've got to focus on the whole learner. And depending on the community, people embrace that, or sometimes they pull back from it, because especially in some of our more affluent communities, they feel we should just be academic institutions because they don't have to feed the kids. Right? But here's my belief, and you mentioned special ed. I have 5 children, 2 are disabled, and 1 severely disabled, and the other one, pretty high level of disability, was in a coma and life support systems for 3 months at the age of 11 with a traumatic brain injury when he was hit by a car. I believe even in those affluent communities, there are pockets of kids not well served. And I also believe in some of those communities, there's a growing number of kids in poverty. And I don't think those districts know how to address it. And here's my hunch. Savannah-Chatham, you know how to address that. Talk to me a little bit about this concept of whole learner when we think about core academic skills and feeding of kids and how many you must have fed during the pandemic, and then the explosion in mental health issues. What's your reaction to this issue about whole learner?
Well, I am so glad you asked that question because I am a speech and language pathologist by training. So I spent my teaching career working with children who are differently abled because every child has a gift. Regardless of how we determine that they are compared to the typical learner, they have a gift, and our job is to find it and unwrap it. So I say to everyone that children have abilities in different areas, and even our children who seem to have the largest obstacles to overcome when it comes to cognitive abilities, they have a gift. Our job is to find it. So they're just differently abled. I also believe, and my training leads me to see children along in their development along the pathways that you've heard Dr. Comer talk about a lot. Of course, full disclosure, I worked with him for a very long time at the Yale Child Study Center. So my orientation always is around looking at how children grow and develop along each of those pathways. Of course, schooling is centered around cognitive development and demonstration of cognitive performance. But children also have to be seen as whole people because there's language development that is key to how they live in the world. There's social development. We often see challenges with that in lots of adults and lots of children, but certainly social development. And then there's sense of emotion or psychological development is we have to pay attention to. Of course, we also give attention to physical development. So not only how they're growing physically, but also how they maintain a really strong, healthy body so that they can manage their lives. And then, of course, we look at them in their ethical development. How is it that they're able to make ethical decisions that benefit themselves but also do not create harm for others? So our conversations as a commission were right up my alley. Whole child development. They're not brains on a stick, they're real people, and they develop and they function along all those pathways. And we want to see them be able to be strong as adults, but they move at different paces over time. And so I may have a kid who's struggling socially, but cognitively, academically, he is blowing it out of the water, but his social skills serve as a barrier. So we have to work on that. Or his physical skills may not be where we want them to be, so we have to work on that as well. So if we see them as anything other than brains on a stick and stop operating as if that's all they are, we will find great success with our children.
I love that description. And during the pandemic, you just mentioned how important language development is and social development. Both took a pretty heavy hit during the pandemic. What are we going to have to do? And you're a member of Learning 2025, our national network. What do you think we should be doing in the network to help districts both recognize what you just said and find some best practices to begin to share across that network to solve what I think is a critical problem? Because if we don't solve that problem, I think we're going to see a continual hit even on the academic side.
Sure. One of the things I think we have to do is re-educate people and help them see the wholeness of kids. Other than that, we're going to continue to see what we're seeing on the news with this kind of aberrant, shocking behavior in adults who are very often the model for children. if we don't spend the time finding out what we're each doing to support strong mental health services for children and adults and families who need it, then we're going to suffer immeasurably for it. I believe that there are partners in our various communities who have those skills that we can call upon. We simply need to ask and then make arrangements so that those services can be more readily available to those who need it. Our staff needs to be much more observant, but also help people feel comfortable with asking for help and receiving help. In my district, we offer help. People don't always want to receive it, but we help them understand that our goal together is to make it so that our children can be successful, and helping them identify the behaviors that say, I need help. Sometimes children are screaming for help, and we simply are not hearing those screams. So I think it's important for our districts, each of us in our own way, dealing with some of this, forming partnerships. I had an opportunity to talk with my colleagues about partnerships. I'm not afraid to ask, Bill, what can you do to help me? You have an expertise in this area. People generally want to help, but we have to ask for it. And when we get it, not overwhelm them or ourselves, but taking it slow and carefully. I find that we are each doing something to address the issue. We need to measure the results, but also we need to share what we're learning.
You know, with your background, and mine's quite different, but based upon our experiences, we both have this deep commitment to all children and CAPS. And I think back, and I'm a lot older than you, so I remember, thank God for Ted Kennedy and the passage in 1975 of 94-142. And Bonnie's my wife, Audrey, who has something called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Audrey was 5 years old when that legislation passed. And she, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome puts her on the deep end of autism and the deep end of epilepsy. She's never had a day without a seizure. Okay, and this is 50 years. You can understand what that has done to cognitive development, physical development, and so on. And Bonnie, my wife, is a full-time advocate, unpaid, for the disabled. And early in the 70s into the 80s, we were so aware of families that were like embarrassed because the child had a disability. We've gotten better as a nation at that, we really have. But what Bonnie and I saw in those 70s and 80s about parents having this sense of being embarrassed their child was disabled in a denial state. I find that we're almost there today on mental health. That our families are embarrassed that our kids have a mental health problem. And therefore, from my sense, I'd like to get yours as sitting superintendent. It seems like we get that problem today that we can't sometimes aggressively go after this issue because people are in great denial. Does that make sense to you?
It makes lots of sense, and we see it. We see it, although I think based on the conversation on the impact of the pandemic, we have an opportunity here, an engraved invitation, I would say, to really shift the conversation because we see behaviors and they're so public that indicate there's something awry. Instead of naming that behavior and labeling it as negative, we are seeing it now as an opportunity to name that behavior for what it is, which is an indication, sometimes a chemical imbalance, sometimes something else, but it indicates a need for addressing, not shaming, but addressing. And I see it when we talk about, for example, the opioid problem that we are having in America, treated very differently than the crack epidemic, we see it as an indication that there is a dependence here that we need to treat as an illness. Our mental health state of America, period, the world, period, based on the pandemic, says, I may be having some issues that you're having as well. Let's come together around that. Let's see if we can find a solution. The challenge is our practitioners out there are now being overwhelmed because we are asking for help. So now what we have to do is find other ways to address some of that. I never thought I'd see the day when online therapy and telehealth would be welcomed. And now that is like, well, you can't see me in person. Can you do online? Can you do telehealth? I remember going into Savannah-Chatham in 2013 and in 2014 making a presentation around telehealth services. And you would have thought I had like 12 heads and horns. Now, people have no problem getting on Duo or whatever the system is so they can speak to their medical professionals. I think we're going to be in the same place with mental health services.
Well, I hope you're right. And you're right, we're beginning to see signals. The pandemic was terrible, but, you know, it probably has become a tipping point to address lots of issues we all knew we needed to address. You know, final question, Ann. 6 years as a superintendent, great reputation amongst your peers nationwide, member of the commission, part of the Learning 2025 National Network. What worries you most now about where we are in education and what we have to address?
So I want to talk about what's immediately worrying me, which may be very practical and seem really minute at the moment. Today, what worries me is that we are going to ignore the challenges that families are facing and the students are facing and staff are facing around mental health. That we're not going to engage those members of those professions that can help us. That we're not going to give them the solutions that they need so they can offer greater services to those who really need it. And that access will be limited in ways that we don't need it to be limited, especially at this time. So I worry about that. Can I get enough people? Can I get enough counselors, social workers, therapists? Can I get enough services into my folks so that they will be well? And that we will not share the coping strategies that we know are necessary for us to all get our balance back. The second thing is that I hope we don't ignore the needs of families around affordable housing and food and nutrition. The fact that we're even at this point of debating whether we can have USDA waivers for children to have meals is just ludicrous. And that we should be paying attention to the indicators that those things are still needed. And I believe that if Ann had a magic wand, she would make meals a part of our regular schooling practices. Number three, I hope that we will at some point get to the point that broadband and internet access is not something we have to debate about. That we will have the infrastructure necessary so that children, families, regular citizens will have access to broadband, because that is the connection that we need to the world. And then number four, I hope we will finally appreciate who our educators are. They make tremendous sacrifices to serve children wherever they are. And having options is wonderful, but having options that lock out children because they don't measure up is a nightmare to me. So if the only way I can get into a program is that I have a B average and that I can perform in a way that speaks to a particular kind of background, I don't get an opportunity. I don't want that. I want public education to be there for all children, and I want our work to continue to be so that we even that playing field. that if children who need more get more, and children who have more, then certainly we don't stop them, but we make it so that all children have the opportunities they deserve. That is what I want.
I loved your response, Ann. And I go back to my first question I happened to ask you was about, we're about the whole learner, not just an academic institution. And in a presentation yesterday, I said, we ultimately, when we really recognize this, we have a workforce design problem because we are still basically organized to be an academic institution when academics are essential, but they're not adequate. And when we begin to think about all the staff you just identified, they're somehow an added burden rather than part of our core responsibilities. Yeah. And you were a great commissioner. You've been great as a Learning 2025 national network. And thank you for loving all children, Ann.
Thank you. That's what we're here to do.
Thanks.
Thank you.